You're listening to the Fan2Fan Podcast, and on this episode, we continue our conversation about George Romero's 1978 zombie classic, Dawn of the Dead. Here we go. You're listening to the Fan2Fan Podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Bernie Gonzalez. With me today, fellow co-host Pete Charbonneau, and we have returning guest Brooke as we continue our conversation about 1978's Dawn of the Dead. And in part one of our conversation, we talked about the movie, its themes. We got into mall culture and how we grew up in the 80s and how this movie kind of allowed us to escape into the fantasy. What would it be like if during a zombie invasion apocalypse, you had the ability to hide in a mall? What would that be cool? Would that be fun? So we got to kind of explore that idea, and we continue our conversation about the movie in this episode. We talk about how Brooke and Pete were able to see the movie in a theater. That's right, in a theater, the Carolina Theater to be specific, in Durham, North Carolina. We talk about the gore, how the movie holds up. Brooke shares how she has shared Dawn of the Dead with her son, and more.
In 1968, George Romero brought us Night of the Living Dead. It became the classic horror film of its time.
Not that room! Not that room!
Now, George Romero brings us the most intensely shocking motion picture experience for all times.
It gets up and kills. The people it kills get up and kill. This situation must be controlled before it's too late. They are multiplying too rapidly.
Dawn of the Dead.
Meet me on the roof at 9 o'clock. Getting out.
I don't believe
We're
it.
going to
What?
get out in the chopper. We've got to survive. Somebody's got to survive.
They kill for one reason. They kill for food. They eat their victims.
Imagine, if you will, that something has gone terribly wrong.
Shoot it, man.
Now, accept the fact that there's no escaping the horrible consequences. George Romero brings back the dead. Night of the Living Dead has ended. Dawn of the Dead is here.
We must not be lulled by the concept that these are our family members or our friends. They are not. They will not respond to such emotions.
Operator dead. Post abandoned. We may never get out of the room. It's everywhere. What the hell is it?
Looks like a shopping center, one of those big indoor malls.
What are they doing? Why do they come here?
Some kind of instinct, memory, what they used to do. This was an important place in their lives.
What is it?
We've got a war.
I'm afraid.
We have spawned our own savagery. Soon it will consume us all. It is a horrible, hauntingly accurate vision of the mindless excesses of a society gone mad.
They must be destroyed on sight.
When there is no more room in hell, the dead will walk the earth.
We are down to the line, folks. We are down to the line.
Dawn of the Dead.
All right, so since you guys have seen this now in the theater, what was the experience like? And I know you mentioned, Brooke, you were by yourself in the theater with a few other people, but what was it like seeing it on the big screen?
Oh, it was great. Well, yeah, the first time I saw it last year on the big screen was in 3D. It's not a movie that needs to be in 3D. In fact, it kind of took away from it in some ways. It just was weird. But when I just saw it with Pete at Carolina Theater, it was like, okay. I mean, there's a lot of people there. It was a day that they were having like a horror festival in downtown Raleigh too. So I think that kind of like added to it. Like there were probably some people that maybe came there after to watch that movie. I'm not sure, but it was pretty full. I mean, it was a smaller theater. They have I think they have like 3 or 4 different theaters in there,
including
but
the big main one.
Yeah, it was one of the smaller ones, and it was pretty full, and everyone seemed to be having a really good time. It was a mix of men and women. It was young people in our age. We're probably some of the older ones that were there, but yeah, it was like a mix of ages, and everyone seemed to be really into it. I don't think, if I had to guess, I would say most people had already seen the film. But yeah, there was a lot of energy, and you could see, whenever you go to the Carolina Theater, there's just an energy about it. Like, the people that are going there are into films, and they're film geeks just like we all are. So it's kind of like you feel like you're with your people, and that gave it a little bit more of a boost as far as like, the feeling you get when you're in the theater, when like everyone is kind of like into it and feeling the movie. So yeah, it was awesome. I loved it, and I know Pete did too.
He was the one person cheering when Roger died. He's like, "That's right.
It's about damn time.
You dumb son of a
You've
bitch.
done enough
That's what you
damage." No, I'm not. I meant Steven, not Roger.
He was laughing. Pete was into it.
I remarked to you, Bernie, I think to you as well, Brooke. This was probably one of the most fun movie-going experiences I've had in a long time. I'm a little bit newer as far as like the Carolina theater experience, but I wasn't quite sure what the crowd makeup was going to be or the size. And so to have it be almost full, even though it was a smaller theater, was great. Everyone's reactions was amazing. Brooke, I'm curious. I was going to ask you because I thought that it's skewed kind of 50-50 for men and women.
Yeah.
And I know not to stereotype, but certainly when I was growing up, like this was the stuff of mostly boys and men watching these type of movies. So to see, so many women in there, I was certainly making mental notes of the people that were kind of laughing at certain parts. Like I always forget how funny this movie is, and most of it is intentional. Some of it's unintentional because some of it is just some dated material that rings kind of funny or awkward or slightly problematic in 2024. But
maybe you should check your blood pressure there, Pete. Just throwing that out there.
Yeah. But like, like when they first come upon the mall and like, what the hell is it? And they're like, it's one of those big indoor mall. Like that got a chuckle because, again, like 1978, very different. I mean, I was getting a chuckle out of us when I was seeing this in the early 80s because malls, certainly on Long Island, were ubiquitous at that point. So it's like mall culture was in full force. But even like, and again, Brooke, I'll throw it to you in a second because I'm curious to get your thoughts on this. But I was certainly taking note of at the beginning when the character Willie, who's like the one SWAT guy that's racist and is just kind of, all too happy to be blowing away humans and zombies when they go into the tenement project.
How the hell come we stick these low-life bastards in these big-ass fancy hotels anyway? Shit, man, this is better than I got. Hey, you ain't gonna talk them out of here. You gotta blow them out.
Just stay cool, okay? When we go in there, don't pop off, all right? I'll be okay.
Come on, let's get on with it. This is a waste of my time. Let's go!
And he starts dropping the N-word, and he's just going off. He's a buffoonish character, and Peter waxes him pretty quickly before he can do too much damage. But there was a younger black woman in the audience, and when he dropped the N-word, she kind of gave like that nervous chuckle at it and was like, "Oh," and and it's interesting to see it again, a movie that's 45 years old now, but certainly something that was done, independent film done without major studio interference. So like you're really looking at George Romero's vision on screen without interference from anything other than what he wants up there. And so I just, it was interesting trying to put myself in someone else's shoes, like seeing something like that, because I was assuming that she was seeing that for the first time, and to kind of almost get smacked in the face by some character like that, like right up front, like right at the beginning, as you're still trying to get your bearings on what's going on in this movie. I don't know. I don't know if I have anything deeper to say other than I was just kind of observing the surroundings and everyone else taking it in, because again, like to be sitting in the theater watching this movie that I've loved so much over the years, I consider it a privilege and a joy to have been able to do it. So again, Brooke, I'll throw it to you, like, you know, that 50-50 skew of men and women. I don't know, is that saying something about just more women are getting more involved in horror or openly more into these type of movies now, or curious to see them?
Well, I think that's been happening for a while. I definitely noticed that there was more women, and younger women are fascinated by older horror films. And it's just kind of, I don't want to say it's a trend, because people like what they like, and it's not necessarily a trend, but there's something, if you like horror films, then to me, you're a different kind of person. Like you want to feel things, right? You like being scared. You like feeling things deeply. Like I think the people I've met in my life, that most people that I meet are like, oh, I can't stand horror movies. And I've always felt weird for liking them, or was made to feel weird by I remember my ex-father-in-law would just be like, why do you watch that stuff? And I'm like, I don't know. Like, I think it's cool. And then I was like, oh, is there something wrong with me that I like this stuff, that I'm like fascinated by it? I just love it. And I always have. And yeah, I always felt weird because there's not a lot of girls growing up my age that, you know, I was born in 79. And yeah, there's not a lot of girls that are into horror movies. And there's not a lot of women my age that are. There's a few, but I think that's changed, just like everything else. All age groups. And I thought it was really cool how many women we saw there. And I thought they were, for the most part, pretty young. So yeah, I love that. And yeah, I think I was pretty happy with the outcome as far as like how many people were there. I wasn't expecting a ton of people. Like, I was kind of worried like that there wouldn't be a lot of people. So I was impressed, but I should have realized at Carolina Theater, because people that are going to Carolina Theater, they know what's up.
That's true. And I should say, I think what surprised me about the crowd, there being as many people there, was it wasn't just like a one-off showing. Like, they showed it all weekend long, like Saturday and Sunday, like I think there were like 4 showings a day. So I guess that in and of itself speaks to what the theater thought, that they were like, well, we can get enough people in to kind of justify, you know, running it out 2 days for 4 showings. So the movie is over 2 hours long. So it's not one of those like, oh, we can pack this in because we can, you know, an hour and a half movie, we can run this through a bunch of times. One other anecdote I want to say about my viewing experience was, and I didn't give this much thought until I saw it on the screen, you know, I had grown up with Dawn of the Dead, watching it on VHS, you know, my entire life. That comes with the quality that VHS offers you. And I don't think I've ever seen the film in such a crisp, pristine fashion, so much so that I remarked the scene, again, back to the tenement building, when they kind of go into the basement and you've got like where the residents have kind of stored all their former relatives and friends and family. And Peter goes in and starts to shoot them. Never had noticed before that he's got like tears streaming down his eyes. Mm-hmm. And I was like, that was kind of amazing. Like, I never caught that on like the grainy VHS quality tapes that I had seen before. Just one more little element that just ingrained this movie more into my heart. Like, I'm like, there's just, you know, for all of the, you know, you alluded to this, Bernie, like there's a lot of the fantasy wish fulfillment in this movie. Certainly when I saw it as a kid, like, would talk to my friends and my cousins, like, wouldn't it be awesome to hide out in a mall and just blow away all these zombies, and, you know, like, not looking at it any further in terms of societal issues or anything other than, hey, there's zombies and I'm a 14-year-old kid. Wouldn't it be great to walk around with like an M16 with my SWAT buddies and just clear out a mall so we can live and go ice skating, you know, every day. And so now seeing it again, older, now that I'm 51 years old, just a scene as simple as that, or just a moment that I had never knew existed before. It resonated so much more with me. And again, I'm so thrilled and amazed that, you know, that Brooke and I got to see that in the theater. What an experience. Love it.
Yeah. And to see, it was really cool for me too, like, to see a movie, with a stranger friend, like in a horror movie that we all love, and like that was awesome for me. Just it's always cool to experience things in real life.
Yeah, and with such a fun crowd too, right? I mean, the people were laughing when they were supposed to be laughing. People were gasping when they should have been gasping. People were kind of holding their breath at parts. Like it was like anything that you would want in a movie-going experience that I don't know if it's completely lost in these days. I think, you can point to something where you're getting like a devoted, committed group of people that are going to come out and see something like this in the theater. And the experience is just, I mean, you can't beat that. You can't beat that sitting at home, even if you've got some friends over. There's something magical. And, I'm not expecting to change any minds with this. This is just my personal opinion as someone that, since a very young age grew up going to the movies. But you just can't beat something like that when, people are laughing along at, a line that, that someone says in this movie, or just, like the goofy music that kicks in, the mall music that kicks in at some point. Like when people are reacting, when and you're almost kind of waiting for that to happen. And then when it does happen, it's like you were saying, Brooke, it's like, oh, these are my people. These people get it. This is why I'm supposed to be sitting here right now, because we're all having this communal experience and we're all kind of, we're reacting to the points and the parts that we're supposed to be reacting to.
That's kind of neat that you guys especially talked about like the varied age range of the people that were there. And maybe that's where, like, I always heard how Romero is kind of, I don't want to say it's like an insult, but that his directing style is very workman. There's nothing flashy about it. It's very straightforward. The camera is always where it needs to be. It's not very flashy, but it works. But I think if you think about like Night of the Living Dead, that was 1968, and that was Martin Luther King gets assassinated. I think Robert Kennedy was assassinated later in the same year. You had a lot of student protests because of Vietnam. Mm-hmm. And I just like imagine Romero with his Pennsylvania crew, which seemed to be a lot of people who were very like-minded. Like they had found their tribe. So they had found people that they could work together and make commercials and make work that could pay the mortgage. And at the same time, do stuff like this where they could go have fun on a weekend and enjoy it, but at the same time still tapped into what was going on. And then we're all byproducts of the 80s and that mall culture and Reaganomics and all that other stuff, but how even at a time now where some of the people that were in the audience with you guys were maybe of an age where they did not experience mall culture because they came much later after that. And there's a lot of things in the movie that were not a part of their growing up. There's still a lot of themes that still resonate. The tenement now, like, and you guys kind of talking about it, I'm like, I imagine Peter probably doesn't live very far from there. And maybe that, Pete, is the motivation behind the tier where he's like, these are my people. Like, these are my neighbors. And this is where I live. This is my neighborhood. And like, this is awful that I'm like kind of doing this because I don't want them to suffer. So I'm going to shoot them, but I'm certainly not getting joy out of this. And I also maybe respect the fact that, like the priest that comes out and, kind of makes the very sarcastic comment like, oh, you guys kind of took over us. Like there's a lot of, again, like poverty and classism being thrown out there.
Senores, please to let me pass.
Let's get into the barracks.
No, please. Just let me pass. I go up the 7th floor to find my sister. Just let me pass. The people of 107 will do what you wish now. Many have died last week on these streets. In the basement of this building, we find them. I have given them the last rites. Now, you do what you will. You are stronger than us. For soon, I think, they be stronger than you.
Like you said very early on, Brooke, too, like a lot of this stuff is very in your face. Like he doesn't hide it, but maybe to Romero's credit, it translates. It's even after all these years with different audiences, different ages, they still kind of see it. And even when you get kind of punched in the face with some things, as quirky as a zombie getting a pie in the face may be. You're like, all right, this is a weird tone shift. But at the same time, like there's some stuff here that you're like, oh no, I get that person. I get Fran's character. I understand what they're doing. And I get it. I've never been in a mall. That was something that my parents did. But like this movie still works. It still does what it was supposed to do.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's definitely a classic. And it introduced me to Romero in general. And then I started becoming kind of obsessed. And I saw Day of the Dead after that, after I revisited Night of the Living Dead, and Day of the Dead is great. And gosh, so much gore. Who can forget that one scene? The guy gets ripped apart. But then I think it was Land of the Dead that came out in the early 2000s or mid 2000s, when I was kind of in that, like, I got to see every Romero film. And I saw that movie, and I like dragged my husband at the time, and I was like, we have to see this, like you have to do it. And he's like, I don't want to go. Finally I got him to go, and it was not that great of a film, but I remember the experience because I was so excited for it to come out and just see the next Romero film. And then I kind of watched even his non-zombie films later, and like a few years ago I watched the Witch movie. Now I'm drawing a blank. Season of the Witch, yeah. And that was I actually really enjoyed that movie. It's totally different from the zombie films and his other films. I thought it was really good, like 70s film about a woman who wanted a change.
I don't know if you've seen The Crazies, but that's another one that I really enjoy. Like the remake that they did a bunch of years back with Timothy Olyphant, it was actually pretty good. But the original, again, like 70s, you definitely see that streak of anti-authoritarianism in Romero in that one as well. And there's like a heartbreaking scene at the end of that movie that's still like, he may not get like the best actors per se, just because a lot of his stuff is just, very independent and just, low budget. But I would still argue like the performances that he gets out of people are still, for what the movies are actually pretty outstanding. Dawn of the Dead, being among those, like, and I think he said it himself, because, the original plan was to have the nihilistic ending where, Peter doesn't go back to the roof, and then Fran kills herself by getting her head or chopping her head off on the blades of the helicopter.
That's right.
But then Romero was like, I like these characters too much. I don't want them to die. And I find that really interesting how, again, when you've got like the singular vision, like I don't think Zack Snyder would have done that when he did the remake. Like I don't think he would have at the last minute had like that change of heart and be like, oh, we're gonna redo the ending, because like he had, and that's not necessarily a knock on Zack Snyder for that aspect of it, but I love the fact that Romero is just kind of, so collaborative. And you get that a lot when you hear interviews with people. Like, he would just kind of tell Tom Savini, like, I need someone's head chopped off. However you want to, go figure out how to do that. Or we got to do this scene, and we got to figure out someone jumping over a railing onto a mattress and a bunch of cardboard boxes. And you're probably going to end up doing that, Tom. Just his filmmaking is just, I think it gives people that are fans of movies, I think it's a warm feeling to know like how he kind of just was able to do a lot of this stuff in his own way and without a whole lot of compromise with the people that he was making it with, but not compromise with studios and the higher ups that usually kind of get involved and end up fucking up, a lot of these movies. Like he would work within like his crew, and if someone had a great idea, he would use it. And you get like this very, documentary style. I guess, I remember seeing it like at the time, couldn't put the term grindhouse on it, but it's kind of like a grindhouse type, movie that you're watching, certainly with Dawn of the Dead. That's I think the added value for me is just like the backstory of how all this stuff comes together, and his vision and the people that he works with, putting something together with like, Scotch tape and and a couple of wishes.
All right, Brooke, I always ask, this will be last question, but anytime anyone's on that has kids, I got to put you on the spotlight. You're a horror fan. Have you shared Dawn of the Dead with your kid yet?
I tried. So, he's 11, and he's in some ways a very mature 11 because he's an only child. And he's, when you talk to him, he talks like a little adult, but he's so innocent, like inside, internally. So I tried. I said, well, it won't be that bad. And I forgot about, which I don't know how I did. I just saw it, but I think it looks so fake that I've heard him comment about how things are funny when they look really fake. So I was just like, oh, this will work. So I showed it to him maybe about 2 months ago, 2 or 3 months ago, and he was scared. He wanted me to shut it off because that first, I mean, if you think about it, like it is very scary, especially that first part. I wasn't really thinking about the first part of the movie when the cops are going in and they're shooting, and it's not even just scary. It's just like, I mean, they're shooting people in the face, and that guy with his language, like it's all like, and he's so innocent, and I think and I was like, oh, but look how fake that blood looks. Isn't it funny? But he couldn't get past that. And he actually, like, I put it, and we stopped the movie shortly, not far into it, maybe like 25 minutes into it. And he was like, I was putting him to bed. And he's like, Mommy, I'm scared. And I was kind of shocked that he was so scared. But then I think back to when I watched it the first time when I was 23. And I was actually pretty scared at 23 because I had never seen anything like that before. And there were parts that really scared me and shocked me, I think. And I think that was more of it, like for him, even like, it's just like he's never seen anything like this. Like people are just getting murdered and like biting their moms and on the neck. And he's a kid. So I'm actually kind of glad, he's got his innocence, and eventually he'll want to see it again. He really loved Night of the Living Dead, which I showed him a year or two prior, and he thought that was funny. Like, parts of it were funny, and he thought it was a good movie. So I thought I was going in the right direction, but I think it was a little too soon. So check back in a couple of years.
He just has time to build it up in his head now that when you show it to him in a couple of years, it'll be like, oh, yeah. My last question kind of pigeonholes with what we just talked about. Brooke, you shared, like, with the blood being so red and so cartoony, which I think was Romero's intention, was he wanted to be like a comic book. I'm trying to remember, like, when I first saw it, like, I don't remember the makeup or the blood being a distraction for me. And I'm curious if you guys can think back to when you first saw it, if you thought the same thing. Like, I was so immersed in the movie, at the time that I saw it, like, that none of that stuff had any, it didn't take me out of it at all. There's just something about some of those scenes that when you see it at, I guess, any age, it's going to stick with you. But makeup stuff and the blood, like, just did not take me out of the movie at all. Curious if people seeing it now, it might be a little more goofy, but I was going to put it to both of you. If you can remember back when you first saw it, like, did that have any effect on it, or were you just kind of going with the movie at that point?
I'm kind of in the same boat. Like, I didn't really notice it the first time I saw it. I couldn't tell you. I just remember being scared, and yeah, I think maybe towards the end, when they're pulling out the intestines of the biker. Yeah, I at that point, yeah, but not in the first scene. And then as I'd watched it again several times, the greenish makeup is just like, okay, this is ridiculous. But honestly, the last time I saw it, the last time we saw it, I was like, if you were a zombie, your skin might actually be that color. And then I was like, it almost like it came full circle. Like, I didn't notice it at first, and then I did for many years and thought it was funny. And then I'm like, you know what? It's really not that implausible that your skin would look that color.
You know what? I didn't think about it then. When I think about it now, like, it kind of does make sense. Like you said, Romero, big fan of like EC Comics, like he does Creepshow. And then it's produced by Dario Argento, who did Suspiria. And that is nothing but bright, very bold colors.
That makes sense.
You can almost see someone like Argento, who had actually flown out Romero and his wife to Italy to, like, hey, get away from your area and, like, come over here and, like, write the film. You could almost see someone like Argento being like, and make it more red. And you can, and George Romero being like, maybe that's a little bit too red. And, someone like Savini, who had been in Vietnam and had seen a lot of, the horrors of war, being like, wait, what do you guys, want me to think of creative ways to kill people? And you want me to be a little, like, you want me to use all the red dye? Like, okay. In some ways, like that kind of adds now, I think, to the cartooniness of it that makes it almost like deflates a little bit of the intensity of it.
You've got me thinking now. Now I'm picturing the Romeros at Dario Argento's villa in Italy, and like he's just keeps serving them like, meal after meal, and be like, "Would you like a more of the sauce?" So, like he just keeps introducing sauce, and then to like psychologically like just drive home the point of like, make the blood as red as you want, George.
That was the best Italian accent ever, Pete.
Thanks.